So today I want to talk about our connections, our shared dreams, and humanity. I also want to talk about what makes home home and about harvesting joy. I can tell you that having started my life over a couple of times, I know about joy. Before coming to the US, I had 28 full years of life in the southernmost country in the world. I'm the third of four sisters. I grew up in Chile with parents that were crazy about science, who taught us math and chemistry and physics at an early age, hoping that these four girls they were raising will go to school to study hard science, or at least medicine. And we, which is pretty remarkable for parents that decided your future, chose to disappoint them by becoming an engineer, a teacher, a journalist, and a psychologist. I'm the journalist. It is crazy how human beings adapt to unbelievable situations, because now that I tell you about the paths my sisters and I chose, I think about how we planned for any of this, careers or dreams, while blackouts and bombings were going on in Santiago, our city. You see, I was 3 when the coup happened. And after the takeover, I grew up under a military dictatorship with no free press, and where Congress, judicial, and the executive powers were suspended and replaced by a military junta. And in those 16 years, when terrible things happened, we sisters had birthdays. We went swimming in the ocean and dreamed of becoming something and someone. This is incredible to me that we did this under sheer uncertainty and dangerous times. Yet we look for small joys and pleasures in life as part of our daily survival because we had to. Our childhood, for the most part, was around learning, going outside and riding our bikes, playing cards and dominoes, and sharing with friends. About 10 years before the Cold War ended, I looked at playing sports and playing with my sisters and studying as the only possible outlets in our lives. We learned in my family at an early age that it was healthy to have a general lack of trust in institutions, because most of them, at the time in which I was growing up, had absolute power. This absolute power caused terrible harm. So we developed this second nature to keep ourselves alive. You see, I had relatives in exile, friends of friends disappeared, and others killed. And while I know this, and I can say this now, I didn't know it at the time. It was all kept quiet. I believe that the times that we live in shape us. And I would like to add that we're all capable of transcending such times. How do we go against the current? How do we fight bullies and gather strength when harm is being done? Well, here we are at my second story. Joy, friendship, family, and community are central to my life. All of them are sources of extended happiness. So when I remember the first law of thermodynamics, did I tell you that my parents were crazy about science and they taught me physics pretty early? Well, when I remember that the law of conservation of energy asserts that energy within an isolated system is conserved, and it states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed or transferred, I'm even happier. Think about it. As a kid, I did. And I came to the conclusion that since creating energy or destroying it is out of the question, transforming energy is our life's work. And we women are at the center of this universal energy transformation. And whether we physically give birth or not, we women are the change makers and the educators, the peacemakers and the builders of critical mass. Women transforming energy results in a paradigm shift with new ways of thinking and doing. And maybe this is why I love art, music, all of it is energy transformed. I told my daughter Almendra, who is the person in my life for whom I will change everything, that if I ever had a superpower, it was the ability to do integrative thinkings, which is basically learning from different disciplines. I not only look at data or case studies to think about things, I also look at the fantastic evidence that our storytelling, our poetry and music continue to leave humanity as a lesson plan to learn to use our hearts and brains. This is in part a pedagogy of freedom, to think with the heart and brain, to transform energy, and to harvest joy. Now, what else is central to joy? Finding the place that you call home. I was looking at places in the Chilean Patagonia on my Instagram some time ago, and while I was watching videos of volcanoes and glaciers and places I have never been to, I had this incredible awareness that my brain had started to almost whisper things to me. Like for me to pay attention, and no longer in English, but in Spanish. We sometimes forget that our brains have that capacity to build associations between language, geography, and memory. And because of this whisper that took me back to my Spanish-speaking self, a song started to play in my head like on repeat, and it's called Tengo el corazón mirando al sur. The heart I have is looking south. It talks about missing your ancestral home. Chile is the only place in the world where I can understand and I can ground myself in the land, in direct relation to the Andes Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. And while this sounds like a metaphor, it is absolutely not. Everything you do in Chile, walking, driving, going to the office, taking the train, any movement within the land centers on whether you're going to the mountains or to the ocean. And I miss that, because in the absence of that, after migrating to the US, I had to literally learn my place and space in this new world. Living in the US taught me that I not only had to learn cardinal points, I also had to learn my place. And when you learn your place in a new world, at least in terms of geography, things you don't think that can happen, happen. And I'm gonna leave in suspense because I need water. Thanks. For example, I learned that I was a mestiza, that my ancestors were from the Mapuche nation, and though I always knew that I was in part an indigenous person, it was this US obsession with fabricated categories like race what prompted me to take my first DNA test to find my roots. I also learned that I was a Latina, that certain behaviors were assigned to me because of it. And believe me, being the troublemaker that I am, I have tried hard to stay away from all the stereotypes. Now, having a heart looking south also means that we South Americans, like Chileans and Argentinians, we are longing for a different way of existing and being. It's not just that the South and the North have been defined in terms of power before. The realization I had is that I had to go north to learn how south I was. I realized that by learning my geographic place and discovering identities within me, I had also learned that one, my place is not the place where statistics attempt to confine me. And two, as a Latina immigrant, I share spaces with Black and brown sisters. We have lived historic margins together. Our children have gone to go to school together, and we have faced obstacles and challenges. The joy of learning this centers the fact that we have been willing to create inclusive communities and where we engage in work that not only empowers, but also transforms. So, what makes us sisters, comadres, and friends? What aspects of our lives connect us? Well, I'm gonna leave you one last story that I learned from American anthropologist Margaret Mead. Early in her career, Margaret was giving a lecture when a student asked her, "What would you say is the earliest sign of civilization?" And Margaret said, "When you hear this, what comes to mind are clay pots, tools made of metal, domesticated pets." And she added, "Well, these are all early signs, but here's what I believe to be evidence of the earliest true civilization." And high above her head, she held a human femur, the largest bone in the leg, and pointed to a thickened area where the bone had been fractured and then solidly healed. Such signs of healings are never found among the remains of the early societies, Margaret said. Instead, in their skeletons, we find clues of violence, like, for example, a rib pierced by an arrow. But this healed bone shows that someone must have cared for the injured person. They hunted on their behalf, brought them food, served them out of their own personal risk and sacrifice, and watched over them. In the animal world, where survival is hard, Margaret said, you break a leg and you die. We humans are at our best when we help each other. So I'm sure you've heard me talk about before about healing as an act of communion, and about the fact that literally, when we have been wounded, our healing is not just achieved in our personal work and therapy. That healing is achieved best in community. So I am here, ready to help my sisters with a broken femur or a hurt toe, with institutional wounds or moral injuries, with the wounds of poverty or a broken heart. We share that one responsibility to help each other, not only to just survive, but to live life and find joy. And as I told my bestie a couple of years ago, I'm here because ultimately we are all walking each other home. Thank you.